everybody. My name is Brad, and if I haven't had a chance to meet you, I really would like that opportunity. Last weekend was the first weekend I was back after 2 months of gallivanting, and I discovered something. There are a lot of people who have come to be part of Copper Hills in the 2 months that I was gone, and I haven't had a chance to meet many of you, and so I'd like to do that. Likewise, if you're joining us online and I haven't had a chance to meet you, why don't you send me like an email, brad@copperhills.org. Tell me about yourself, and I would love to meet you this way as best we can, right? So last weekend, we started a series, as you can tell, that's called This Is Us. And what is that all about? Well, it isn't so much this is what we as a church are about, because we actually take our lead from Jesus, who's the head of the church, and who he is. He's actually asked us to be mistaken for him in this world, in our lives, how we live. So I guess it is who we are as a church, but it is really who he is. We want to learn from him and then become that ourselves. I want to remind you of where I started last week in case you're catching up. Rather than dive right into one of the 4 values that we're talking about, I took you to a letter that's written to a church in Colossae way back a couple of thousand years ago. And in it, the author of the letter, Paul, you may have heard of him if you've hung around the church for any length of time, you are familiar with that name. Really inspirational and key leader in the first century of the church. And in it, he wants to encourage the church in Colossae to remember who is first, who is everything, because if they get who is everything, they get everything wrong. And that just can't happen. So he writes this amazing piece of poetry or prose or whatever it is, where he describes to them and for us who Jesus is. And he starts this way. He says, he is the exact image of God. You want to know who God is? Look to who Jesus is. And he goes on with these superlatives of who Jesus is, and he gets to the place where he says that he is preeminent over everything and everyone. He's first over everything. And he adds this, and by the way, just so you don't forget in Colossae and Copper Hills, he is the head of the church. It is his body. And so because of that, we want to take our lead from him and who he is. So last week, we began to walk down a road looking at some of the values that Jesus seemed to live out, and if he's the head of us, we're going to try by his Spirit to be that, because that's who he was. So one of the first things that we looked at last week was we want to help one another move from just being friendly to really befriending people, to do that. That's what Jesus did. He didn't just come in and wish the world a happy day. He wasn't just a good guy, a nice guy. No. He came, left a pretty good deal, came to be with us and to befriend us in a way that cost him so very much to do that. And that's who we want to be with our friends and neighbors, colleagues, people at work, people around us, whatever sphere God's put us in. I didn't mention this last week, but here's a couple of practical things that we do to try to help one another with this. There's a coffee shop right over here that we've opened up. It's called The Well. If you remember, I told you last week about the story of Jesus meeting a woman at the well that developed a conversation, and out of that conversation, she receives new life because of the conversation with Jesus. The whole idea behind calling it The Well is that there would be conversations, that we would bring our friends, our colleagues, neighbors, whatever it would be, sit down and in a friendship kind of way, talk about life and who we are and who they are, and then over time, maybe, just maybe, a conversation about the hope and joy that we have would come up, and we could share with them the hope we have in Jesus. There's a Center for the Arts that's a huge part of our campus here, which the whole idea would be that you could come and you could take writing lessons or piano lessons or cello lessons, whatever it would be, cared for by a teacher who's very skilled at what they do, but loves Jesus even more than they love their skill. And in the course of 12 or 13 weeks of classes, a conversation, a model of who Jesus is, of moving from being friendly to really befriending the students could happen. We do other events here to help support that. In a couple of weeks, we're going to do a comedy evening. I hope you have your tickets. The whole idea behind the comedy evening is that you could invite friends and colleagues, people at work or in your neighborhood to come join you for the evening and just hang out together. For some of our neighbors and friends and college student mates and so on, it'll be the very first time they've ever darkened a church door. And it'll be a great evening. I got a friend up the street from me that I really developed like a wonderful friendship. I love him. And so I invited he and his wife to come, and he says, well, where do I buy tickets? I said, no, I got it. You're my guest. He says, no, you can't. I said, yeah, you're my guest. Just come if you will. He said, yeah, but hold on. I got a bunch of other people that would want to come. I said, I'll pay for everybody. Just bring them. He said, no. Okay, here's the deal. I'll pay for everybody else. You pay for my tickets. And so we're going to have a wonderful evening with he and his wife, and I don't know how many other people. But it's about engaging and loving our neighbors and colleagues at work and friends. Okay, you got it. I could go back. Like, I'm pretty wired up about that stuff, right? Okay, there's a second one. Attending to belonging. What is that? Well, you might right away think, okay, attending. That must be like attending church to becoming more attending, to attend more frequently, to serve, to contribute financially, I guess that's what we're talking about, moving from attending to belonging, because if I belong, I'll do more, be more, have more, give more. No, that's not actually what it means. We're following Jesus' model. And what did he mean by helping people move from attending to belonging? About 4 weeks ago, Elfie and I were in Prescott for a day and a night and a day. And while we were there, we heard from a staff member here on staff that her stepdad was in the final stages of life. He had just, in the last few days, been given word that his body was just done, and that he wouldn't survive the months ahead. And so we decided to visit him at his home. And we pulled up to his home, and he and his wife were sitting in their front lawn area with a couple of patio tables, and went and spent some time with them, sat down, and now he's pretty weak already at this point, right? And so they have arranged this ingenious headphone speaker outfit that he can speak into it. He's got a little portable speaker on his lap that you can hear him speak, because he's frail and he can't speak very loudly, especially outside. It's hard to hear him. So I'd met him a number of times, but I'd never sat with him before just to hear his story. And he's an Arizona history guy. Now, he didn't learn history in like a book. He lived Arizona history. And it's so interesting to sit with him and hear his story of Arizona. And at one point, we didn't stay long, but at some point you could realize he's just getting tired. And so it was appropriate for us to leave. And I said, I want to ask you a question. You're a man of faith, I know that. But you and I both have folks and friends in our families who we really would like to know about who Jesus is. And I know you do, and I do. And so, because there may not be another opportunity, we don't know how long you'll have life. What would you want them to know? What would you want to say to them? And when I did that, his wife said, hold on just a second, and she ran inside and got a digital voice recorder because she wanted to capture this. And so I asked him again, I said, so what would you want your friends and family that you know and love to know about God? And as clear and as sharp with his raspy, frail voice, he said, I would want them to know that God is real. I really would want them to know that. As if to say, I want them to know that God wants them to belong to him. He doesn't want them just to go through life periodically checking in, or you know how it is. We sometimes go to concerts or football games. Maybe you went to last night's preseason game. We got one win this year at least. That's good, right? But here's the thing. If you did, you went to the game, you liked it, didn't like it, you left, you went home, and you carried on with other things. Some of you might have had the privilege of $20,000 courtside seats at the recent Suns run in the playoffs, right? If you are, I'd like to be your friend. But even at that, if that was the case, you walked away from it wondering, was that worth it? Because you attended the game. Do you know that it's possible to have that kind of a worldview toward God? That you just attend with him. What does that mean? That means it's kind of like a need-meeting convenience relationship that we have with him. I'm pretty independent. I can do my own thing, but then I get in trouble every once in a while, and I attend a visit with him. And I hope that he'll reach me, and he's so gracious, he often does, and he'll provide for me or take care of me or help me out in a situation. He's so gracious, and he does that. And then before long, the game's over. The concert ended. And I go about doing whatever I'm going to do. See, that's kind of an attending mindset. And this is not as good as it gets. It's not nearly as good as it gets. You see, Jesus came into this world not so we would attend him, but we would belong to him. So why do I tell you this story about my friend who 2 weeks ago passed away? Because I want to point you to a passage of Scripture today that talks a little bit about the heart of who Jesus is and how he views this attending, belonging continuum that we find ourselves on sometimes. So the reason I tell you the story about my friend is that when we get to the end of life, the few words that we might have are some of the most important words that we'll ever say, because all pretense is gone. And we just say what's there. Well, there are some words toward the end of Jesus' life that I would like to share with you. It's the last night. It's Thursday night. And within 12, maybe 15 hours, he's going to be dead on a cross. So he's got his friends together, his 12 friends together. They're having dinner together. You might remember the scene in an upper room in a rental place in Jerusalem. They've had the dinner together, and he does this really shocking thing where he strips down to his undies and he goes over to each one of the guys and he takes their footwear off and their dusty, dirty feet, and he begins to wash each one of their feet. It's just a stunning picture, if you can imagine that. And then one of the 12 goes off to do the dastardly deed of collecting some money to betray Jesus, and I guess they just hang for the rest of the evening. We don't know for sure, but what we do know is someplace along the way that evening, Jesus takes some time out to pray. And I think the guys must have heard him pray, because it's recorded with such clarity. It's like he's dictating what he's praying. So what does he pray for? Well, first of all, he prays for himself. What does he pray? That he doesn't have to go to the cross? No. He prays that through that, the glory of who he really is would be revealed to the whole earth. That's what he prays for. And then he turns his attention to his close friends, because they belong to him. They matter to him in a way. Everybody mattered, but he's spent 3 years with them. They are special in some way because of what they've experienced together, and then he prays for them, that they won't give up, that they'll hang in, they'll trust, and they'll believe. And then he prays for a third group. You know who he prays for? You and me. Did you know that? That the last words before he goes to the cross are him asking something for us and of us. It's really stunning that he would do that. Well, this is what he says in John chapter 17. He says, my prayer is not only for them. Remember, he's just finished praying for his really close friends, his 12 friends, but I pray also for those who will believe in me. That's us. Will believe in me through their message. What does he want? That they may be one. What does that mean? That means that they would be together. They would belong to one another. They would take care of one another. They would look for ways to encourage and build one another up. And there would be no needy people in the mix. That those who are marginalized and set aside within the community, they would hold great posture and great place, that they would be cared for. Those with much would share with those who have little, and those with little would take what they have and use it to serve and help other people. They would belong to one another. He says, for those who will believe in me through their message, that they may be one, Father, just as you are in me and I am in you. May they also be in us. Now get what's on the line here. So the world will believe that you have sent me. Apparently, it appears the degree to which we're one, belonging to one another, for one another, caring for one another, doing life for one another, helping one another, encouraging one another, all those one another's. Apparently, the world's going to determine who we're really like when we do that. There's a lot on the line here. Jesus goes on to pray some more. He says, I have given them the glory you gave me, that they may be, here it is again, one as we are one. I and them, and you and me. May they be brought to complete unity, to let the world know, there it is again, that you have sent me and have loved them even as you have loved me. This belonging thing is what Jesus intended. Do you know that you were born with a longing to belong? Did you know that? A belonging longer. Did you know you had a belonging longer? You do. We know that from early on. Our children teach us that there's a natural, innate, hardwired element of us that we want to belong. About 30 years ago or so, there was a book written by Susie Becker, I think it was. It's a kid's book. I think it was called The All Right Book. And in the book, she asked children, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, questions about the world and how they would solve them. Like, for example, she asked them about climate change. What would you do? And they give her interesting answers. She asked, how would you get people to stop smoking? And they give some answers. And then she asked this question: of the billions of people that are in this world, surely somebody could come up with a system where nobody was lonely, where everybody belonged to somebody. How would you do that? So she asked these kids this question, and here's some of the answers that they came up with. Well, people should find lonely people and ask their name and address, then ask people who aren't lonely their name and address, and when you have an even amount of each, assign lonely and not lonely people together in the newspaper. That's brilliant. This is 30 years later. Kalani is now 38. She likely is managing a multi-billion-dollar business because of that brilliant administrative organizational idea, right? Here's another one. Here's what I would do. Well, I would make food that talks to you when you eat. For instance, it would say, how are you doing? And what happened to you today? Brilliant idea, isn't it? Kids know there's a natural belonging and nobody should be lonely. Here's another one. Sing a song, stomp your feet, read a book. Sometimes I think no one loves me, so I do some of these. And here's the best one to me of all. This is what we should do. We could get people a pet or a husband and wife, or a wife, and take them places. Kids understand this. There is a longing, belonging, hardwiring in each one of us. We have to belong to somebody or something. Attending has a temporary satisfaction to it. It ends up making us consumers. But when you belong, you know what you do? You give yourself away to the other person. Oh, wait. That's what Jesus did. He came into this world to give himself away so that we would attend, so we would consume, so we would take advantage and use his goods and services. Oh, not a chance. He came that you and I would belong to the God of the whole universe. Belong. Together we would belong, and then we would belong to one another. And that the culture around us would look at that and go, how in all the world do I get to be part of that? Because that's stunning and that's amazing, and I'd give all of my attending stuff that I'm a part of just to be part of something like that. Every Sunday, my daughter and her family come to visit us, and we have a 1-year-old granddaughter, Eden. And I don't know exactly where she learned this. I think it's kind of a spontaneous thing. Grandpa will pick her up, and she will immediately reach for her mom or her dad. So Grandpa takes her out of the room, away from her mom and dad, because he wants to cuddle and hug and have time with Eden, right? The moment he brings her back into the room, what does she do? Forgets all about Grandpa. She just wants to be with mom and dad. Why? Because that's where she belongs. She's been loved there. She's been cared for there. And this is what Jesus wants to do in your and my life. So I want to ask you, if you were to characterize your friendship with God, just stand back and think about it for a little bit. Would you say, I pretty much live all the time with a sense that I belong to him and he's got me and he's taking care of me and he's walking with me because I belong to him. I've been bought with a price. I am owned by him. I belong to him. Or is it actually a little more of an attending kind of relationship? I go to him and I ask him for things and he's so gracious oftentimes and he gives all, and then I don't mean to do this, but other stuff comes up. And I just kind of drift away from that. And then there's this cycle that happens. Belong or attend? Second question, what would you want? Because this one isn't your and my hands. The offer is there from Jesus, and it's up to us to receive it. So what's it mean to belong to him? It means this. We give up our right to ourselves. We give up we give up the need to be first. We give up the need to be right. We give up the need to have our world around us and him serve us and provide for us. And now it's a mutual relationship. We get to ask him, and we get to lay our burdens with him, and we get to pass all of our cares and concerns to him, but then we get to take on his presence in our lives by his Spirit. And there's a synergistic relationship that's happening here. You know what else it means? It means that we look around us and we see people, and they belong to us as well. And so we care for them. We get involved in their lives. Just like we talked last week about we're being more than just like being friendly in our neighborhood, we're befriending people. And so we take notice of them and we take interest. The same thing happens when we belong to one another. We look around and we see what the needs are. We see who needs what, and we take enough interest to get involved. And we give ourselves to people. This is what Jesus taught us. This is how he handles you and me as well. We have an amazing group of young adults that have formed in our church family in the last 8, 9, 10 months, something like this. Pastor Paul and his wife Paula lead it with their team. And it's just growing and growing and growing as more and more 20-somethings are finding their way there and finding a community to belong to. I want to tell you the story of 3 of the young adults that are in this group. And it really is the essence of what belonging to Jesus forms us into people who embrace others around us, and together we belong to one another. We belong to him, and then we belong to one another. I think this is going to inspire your thinking about believing or not. Take a look at this.
Hello, Copper Hills family. We're so excited to be able to share a little bit with you this weekend. I've got 3 of my friends here from our young adults group at the church. This is Hayden, this is Megan, and this is Joseph. And they've decided to spend a little bit of time sharing with you their stories and helping you understand how they've really been able to move from attending to belonging here at Copper Hills. So enjoy their story.
I started coming to church around December. I got baptized October 30th of 2020. But a month and a half afterwards, I was kind of like, I'm looking for something a little bit more biblical, more kind of scripture-based. Like, I'm still trying to learn and whatnot. I don't kind of want all these different analogies. Like, I just want to learn more about the Bible itself. So my friend Carter, he invited me to this church, and I've been a part of this church now for almost 8 months. And then for the young adult group, kind of the same thing. I was a little bit scared to come in because I was like, I don't know what to expect. I don't know what's going to happen, how things are going to play out, stuff like that. So one day I was just like, hey, Carter, I was like, I know you invited me to church. You've been telling me about these Bible studies, these young adult groups. I'm like, can I go? And he's like, dude, of course you can. And so we went over, had a lot of fun. And it was just great to be able to meet new people, to get those new connections, make those new connections, and I'm just blessed by God to be able to be here to tell a little bit about my story.
I was told by my really good friend Madeline, and I was like, hey, can you tell me a little more about these Bible studies? And that's kind of how I got into it. Then it just kind of been a connection from there. I really like how the music, how you can feel the beat and stuff. I was raised Catholic, so none of that was really a big thing for me growing up, and I feel like I needed a change and something a little less on the stricter side. So I feel like that's definitely been my story.
My parents decided to try out the church, and they went to one service, we all did, and my dad was telling me, you should try out young adults to help you to make friends, because I want to connect with people more. And I felt like that this was going to transform my life, which it did. I have a little autism, so sometimes it's hard for me to make friends, and I'm happy that this really benefited me. And I remember where it was like a few people at the group, and now it's like there's a lot. Megan and Hayden got added too, and I'm happy that they went, and I'm happy that they have autism too, and I can relate to that, and I feel like I'm in an environment where I kind of know people well.
I can't really explain it other than it's just God going to work. And I mean, Joseph said it before. I mean, I suffer from high functioning autism, so it's tough at points to communicate with people, like especially just when I meet somebody new. That's something that's always been a struggle, although it doesn't look like it on the outside. You know, sometimes I worry. I'm like, is this going to happen? Is this going to happen? You know, whatever the case may be. So I've been able, when I've attended this group, I've just kind of set everything aside, and I'm just like, you know what, God, just do your thing. Just do your thing, man. And you know, he's never disappointed me, and I don't think he ever will.
I think my story is a lot like Joseph and Hayden's. It's just been always a challenge for me, and there was a point in my life where I felt like nothing would get better, and I was brought here by my good friend, as I mentioned before, but I was also very nervous because I know I had a good friend by me, but at the same time, I was always been told, I had an employer that I worked for said, you don't look like you have autism, and that's always stuck with me because, you know, I feel like what are you supposed to look like? It's high functioning, you can't tell on the outside. So it's a lot of people in general take it for granted and don't realize the concerns that I face, or each face, I don't know. And it's been a blessing because I feel like I can really connect to the young adults group here. So.
Having a supportive community is unmatched with possibly anything. And I mean, for the three of us, I think I think we all connect the same, just because of we all share similar paths down, whether that's finding God or just life in general. So I think that's been a big blessing for me. But just with community as a whole, people that can hold each other accountable, people that can support one another, people that you're willing to fight battles with, if that's with whatever the case may be, hardships in life, stuff like that, that you're going to have a community, that you're going to have a group of people that are going to be there to support you every single step of the way is incredible. It's one of my biggest blessings for sure.
All right, you could applaud for that. Absolutely. You would think, with the billions of people in this world, that someone would come up with a system where nobody's lonely and everybody belongs to somebody. And God did that. You don't even get out of the second chapter of Genesis before he makes this guy named Adam in his own image in some way. And everything is good till he produces him, makes him, creates him, and he says, that's very good. And then just a few verses later, he looks at Adam and he says, oh, this isn't good. What's not good? Because God actually likes women more than men. That's why this isn't good. No, don't applaud for that. No, of course, because it's not good that Adam's alone, that there's nobody else with them. Because God's hardwired into Adam, like he has each one of us, this longing to belong. In a world that is so fractured, even a country that's so fractured, over things like political differences and vaccine, no vaccine, masks, no mask. You know the stuff. We live here, right? I heard this statement just last week, that when the world is divided, the church must be united, because we are the model for what could be in our world. And that model is this: you and I belonging to Jesus and belonging to one another and caring for one another. Having our eyes open to the needs that are there. Those 3 young adults, you talk with them, you engage with them. Till you get to know them, you don't know what their need is. And God, by His grace and goodness, brought them into a community that they just belong. They belong. Not because of their uniqueness, but because of their unique individuality of who they are as people. And this is what Jesus does. So He creates Adam and Eve, and He puts them together because it's not good that anyone would be alone. And then what happens? We drift from Him. It's just us. And so He tries another means: Abraham, Isaac, and Moses, and Noah, and prophets, and priests, and kings. And you would think with all the people in the world that someone would come up with a way that we wouldn't be lonely and everybody would belong to somebody. And then He comes and fixes it Himself. He comes into the world. And what's the first thing God does? Puts him in a family where he's going to belong, the Mary and Joseph family. Because it's not good that anyone would be alone. Nobody. And then He models something in his own life as he grows, and he engages the least likely people. He loves them. He's with them. And then at the end of his life, he shares this thing: God, would you bring them together? Would they be there for each other? Would they belong to each other? Would they look at each other as, you're a fellow belonger? I know you're longing to belong, and I'm part of that. I want to be part of your world. And this is what the world longs for, and they're waiting for somebody to stand up and do that, and we're going to do that by Jesus' grace and goodness. This is who we're going to be. We're going to care for one another. That's what we're going to be. I would say this: if you have an attending relationship with Him, move to belonging. He's invited you into it. You would have to say yes to Him, that's what you would want. And then part of that is this: it's an admission that you don't have a friendship and relationship with Him and you don't belong to Him, but He paid the ultimate price of His life to take away the barrier, your and my rebellion, so that we could belong to Him. But now that's our choice. And then when we say yes to that, He doesn't. If that's what you want, and I would say, like, what you could do to really, like, make a statement on that is, if you've never been baptized, be baptized. Stand in front of the whole world and say, I belong to Him. That's what baptism says. This is what He's done for me. If you're new to Copper Hills and you're going, I don't know if this is exactly where, like, I want to belong, that's okay. Keep checking, keep looking. There's ways that you can do it. Dive into a place of service if you want. Join one of our life groups. We do something called Copper Hills 101, which we're going to do this Wednesday, and so many people want to be part of it. We have to cap it where it is, and we're going to do another one September 15th. So sign up for that one. And then to those of you who do belong here, look for someone else that you can help belong. Take a risk, step out of that area you feel comfortable, and greet and be with and come next to people. Take notice, take interest, and see what God does within us, because we belong to Him. Let's pray together. Jesus, You did not come into this world to create spectators and attenders and consumers, though You meet every one of our needs, every one of them. You came into this world to create belongers, people who would move to that place of trusting You enough to give up their world, their life, their choices, their decisions in some ways, and say, I so want to belong to the God of the universe that I'm going to come on His terms and come quietly, gently, maybe running in desperation, but I'm not content to just have that attending thing. I want to belong. And then Jesus, within our own church family, would You move us to be people who see other people, who reach to other people, who'd come to them and invite them into a belonging kind of relationship. For this is what You modeled for us. If there's anything You communicated at great cost to Yourself, that we do indeed, if we're willing, belong to You.